Hello and welcome to my CSS tutorial. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and it is a programming language that improves your web page. So unlike in HTML, which is the easiest of the common languages, it adds stuff in, but it's just plain black and white web page, a plain black and white web page, which, if you think about it, is boring. So what we're going to use CSS for is to improve it. So to add color, to lay it out better, so it stands out more. So it sort of helps you to get your more attention for your website. Is all it really is about. So it kind of sort of styles more of your text up. It can help you sort of group things together, and it just really helps out. So CSS is all about just helping to style up your web page. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so in CSS there is three ways of coding it. There is inline, internal, and external. Inline is kind of where we use HTML attributes to add it in. So we would just select a start tag that belongs to this part of text or whatever that we want to, change or improve. Add an attribute and then just add the CSS from there. Then there's internal, where we will add it in into the head tags. So that's out of the way. So as I have said in my HTML tutorial, if you've watched that, that the head tags sort of contain the behind the work sort of scenes, so it's the behind the work kind of code. So that's kind of where CSS would go if you want to do internal CSS. The final type is external, where we kind of create a separate CSS file, and we have a tag in our HTML file that links the two files together, so that they just go all the way through. So it just really connects the files together. So it is actually a useful thing to do external CSS, so you don't have clusters of code mixed together of two different languages. So once I teach you the three main types, you can just choose the type you like if you want and just go from there, or you can just do as much as you like. Okay, so first of all, we're just going to get started with some inline CSS. What inline CSS is, as I said, is just CSS written as an attribute into HTML. So first of all, we need to choose a start tag. So I'm just going to go ahead and go into this paragraph one. Okay, so we're going to need to put in the attribute's name, which is style. Okay, and you can think about this as the fact that you obviously CSS kind of designs up your web page. Everybody has their own design of clothes, so you can call that your style. So that's kind of how you can sort of remember via your clothes. So your clothes are your design, and it's also your style. So that's one way of remembering what the attribute's name for internal CSS is. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and add the value. So the first value we're going to add in is one of the properties of text, which, say for example, is the height of it. There is 4 ways in CSS to add the height: points, pixels, percentage, and EM. And these two are kind of put into groups. Points and pixels are sort of specific heights. So if you had, say, something like 16 points, which are actually fractions of inches, that if you had that sort of 16 points, which would be like quite kind of bigger than default size, it might look okay on a laptop, but its comparison on an iPod would seem bigger, as would pixels be. Okay. Now the others, percentage and the EM, that they would kind of keep the comparison between the text and the device the same, no matter what device you're on. So if you want this, if you feel that comparison is important, use percentage and em. Now I'm going to show you what they would look like. Now, for example, we're going to start off with pixels. Now, we need to tell the internal CSS that we're going to increase or decrease the height or whatever. So we're going to use a value property called font size. So, as I said, this would actually increase the size of your text, or the height, if you want to call it like that. So, the first one, say, is going to be 16 pixels. Or 16, sorry, not 19. And this is actually like the default height in pixels. So px would, in this case, would stand for pixels. Now, if you want to go for points, as I said, fractions of an inch, this would be what it is. And 12 is the default in points. Now, as I said, these two don't actually keep the size of the text in comparison with the device, but you can use these if you feel comparison is not important. Now, the other two, percentage and em, are actually pretty simple. The percentage, just like this. This is the default size in percentage, and there's em, which is just like this. Okay. So you can choose one of those or multiple of those, your choice, and just practice with that. Okay. Now, when you have put in the value for your property, in this case font size, put in a semicolon. Okay. So the property value you want, is like font size, and equal that to a value. So you use a colon, then your value itself, and then semicolon. So that's kind of a statement, and statements just end in semicolons. Now, there is another thing you can do to text, which is changing its color. And to do that, you simply need to have the word color spelt without, like, in American way, because HTML was invented in America, so that's why there's no U in there. If you're if you're like European or the fact that you spell color with a U, because I know since Europe does spell color with a U, but this is just for anybody who does spell with the U. Drop the U for just to do this bit of code. Okay, so semicolon, choose any color you want, so blue, for example, and then semicolon to finish that. Okay, so now that you've done that, you want to save the code, and you'll go up to this button here, run. Then you choose which one of those you want, so for example Chrome. Okay, and then if you look right here, basically our paragraph has changed, except for the height, because I actually kept the height the same. Now, if you want, I can go ahead and show you the change. For example, if I change 1em to 2em, and don't forget to save your work once you're done, you can go back to your your web page. You can refresh it, and there you go. It's bigger. Okay, so that's how internal CSS is done, and I'm going to show you one more before I go on to the next type. So, final property you can do is basically change the writing style, which is called font family. So you would start it off font, then family. So this is your writing style, a colon, so it can be equal to a value, and say I'm going to go for Arial. Because that is actually one of the things this is actually one of the writing style that I find easiest to see the difference between default writing style and your own custom writing style into this. Okay, and then semicolon. Okay, so give that a save, go back to your web page, and refresh. Right. Well, that's just changing the font type anyway. So even though you haven't seen a change there, you can go ahead and give a go at others. You can even try those crazy symbols that kind of change any letter to a sort of picture. They actually work as well. And just basically have fun with some of that, okay? So that's basically what inline CSS does look like, okay? And now I'm going to show you what internal looks like. Okay, so now that I've shown you what inline CSS is, I'm just going to show you what internal CSS looks like. So first of all, we're going to need to sort of tell our HTML document that we want to add some CSS in. So we're going to go into the head tags anywhere at all, but make sure it's not inside any other pair of tags. Okay, so we're going to go ahead. So add your style tags. So just like inline, you're using the word style, but with the inline, your style, the style becomes an attribute, whereas if you do internal, style becomes a tag. So it's pretty much very related, but it doesn't really matter. And if you want, not everybody does this, but what you can do is you can have an attribute called type, and then have that equaled to text and slash CSS. Okay, and then don't forget to close your style tag. Okay, so now that we have the tags in, we're now going to add the CSS itself in. Okay, so because we have the CSS in only one tag, aka the paragraph tag, we're going to add that in. And all we simply do for that is we simply use the word P, or the letter P. And this tells the CSS to search through the entire HTML document for any elements with the letter P. So in this case we have one here, and that's pretty much the only one. So once the CSS sort of code knows that this is the element we want to have, we now need to tell it to give certain properties to it. So first of all, we're going to need certain brackets that surround the properties, and these tags are going to be curly brackets. Okay, and it's best practice to kind of have the element first on one line, on the line underneath an opening curly bracket, and then the line after that downwards, blank lines for the CSS, and then a line under the final line of CSS as the closing bracket, because it makes it a lot easier rather than being all cluttered up and having to search carefully through the entire code to search for what you're looking for. Okay, so down here we had like font size, color, and font family. What I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all this so that I can copy that. Okay, so I don't have to retype it. Okay, so this is pretty much the CSS we're going to add in, and I'm going to split them onto the next line after the semicolon. And now I'm just going to get rid of that style attribute, since I'm not doing inline CSS anymore. Okay, so now that we have that sorted, we should now have our internal CSS going on up here. Okay, so now to see if it works. Okay, so save that. Now the way to know if this works or not is just by seeing if nothing changes, which it doesn't. So therefore, internal CSS does work. So if you don't fancy having cluttered HTML with CSS, what will basically happen is that you'll have these massive start tags, and then finally the code that's important, and then an end tag. But what internal does is it kind of separates the CSS and the HTML by putting the CSS between style tags in the head section, and that's pretty much the main difference there. But the one thing they do have in common is the CSS is in the HTML file itself. Okay, so that's pretty much that main bit. So just keep on practicing. You can use both of those types of CSS, or you can choose one of them. It's up to you. Okay, so now we're going to move on to some external CSS. Okay, so now we're going to move on to some external CSS. And as I have said, the external CSS involves having a separate CSS file, but we have a tag that links the HTML and the CSS file together. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a new document, and then we're just going to go back to the HTML file, and we're just going to highlight this part of the CSS since the tags don't really matter. Copy it, and then paste it into your CSS file. Okay, so this will technically be how your CSS file looks. However, we obviously need to save it. So if we go ahead and save the CSS file, and we'll just choose something like some simple, okay, something like that, and just change the type to CSS. Okay, so this one right here, Cascade Style Sheets file. Okay, and then just go ahead and save that, and now you see some changes. The properties, the color turns to gray, and the element color turns to something like a Times New Roman style text, and turns blue. But the blue in this can be kind of hard to see, but it doesn't really matter about the color of that too much. Now, if we just left it like that, nothing, we'll just see what happens. So we'll just get rid of the style tags there. Okay, and we'll save that. We'll go down to the web page just to see what it looks like, and we'll go ahead and refresh it, and it's back to normal. That's because there's one thing we haven't done, which is connecting the two files together. Now, to do this, what we do is we go to the same place that the style tags were in, so between the head tags, and we're going to add something called a link tag. Not the link as in the one that, like this one down here, a hyperreference, all that. This one is a bit different. It connects two programming files together, rather than a word you can select which takes you to another web page completely. So then we're going to add it in the first attribute, which is rel, and inside that its value is style sheet. Sorry. Okay. Now then we're going to need to give it a type, which, if you remember from the style tags, is text/CSS. Okay. And then the final one, hyperreference, and this basically tells it where to go. So we put down my CSS file, so that's what we type into here. Okay, and then don't forget the .css part of it. Okay, now just like the image tag, if you've watched my HTML tutorial, it's an empty element, which means that nothing will go into the tags at all. So therefore we put in a slash and then a tag. We can resave that, and we go down to back to our web page, and we'll see if it works. And there we go. Now, if you will also notice that that if you have your HTML file correct and your CSS file correct, but for some reason the CSS isn't working, maybe check to see if they're in the same folder, and if they are, then that's that sorted. But if the problem is still there, well, you'll just have to work your way around that. But basically, that's external CSS. Okay, so inline, add it into your start tag. Internal, use style tags in your head tag, and external, have a separate CSS file to have a link tag to join the two together. Okay, so now I'm just going to show you a couple of extra things you can do with CSS. Okay, so now I want to show you 3 other extra things you can do. First of all, not only can you change things to do with text, you can also change things to do with the body, which is most usually the background color. To do this, go to your CSS and go ahead to insert the word body, curly brackets. Okay, and as I said, may as well have it like this sort of structure to make it easier for you to differentiate the different parts of the code, and to make it easier for you to spot what you need to change if you want to change any of it. And then you can start away. Okay, so background color. Okay, so just like changing the color for text, the background color is also spelled without a U, so it's except for the part for the word ground in it. Okay, so background color. Okay, and then now you can change it to whatever color you want, most preferably a different color to whatever you use for the paragraph, or else you might not be able to differentiate the paragraph from the body. So say red, something like that, something as simple as that. Okay, and save it, and go to check your web page, and when we refresh it, the entire web page becomes red. Okay, so now that we've done that bit, there's 2 more bits to go. Okay, one of the things I was going to show you is basically ways you can change the size of your image using CSS. So what you can do is go ahead and type in img for image, curly brackets, and then we'll say height, and we'll go for something nice and big. Okay, and semicolon, and then we'll go for the width as well. Okay, and say we'll go for about 500, so this will be pretty big. Okay, and save that, and then when we go back to our web page, it becomes bigger. Okay, so as you can see, that you can do CSS for changing the background color, changing the style of the text, and even changing images. But what about if you want to, say, change part of text? To do this, you'll need to use something what's called as a span tag. And what a span tag does is it kind of chooses what part of individual text you want, surround that text by span tags, and then throw it in together like that. Now, for example, what I'm going to show you is I'm going to take a paragraph, and I'm going to surround the word paragraph with the span tags. Okay, and on the other side as well. Okay, and it could be like as big as you want or as small as you want, anything at all. Okay, so the span tags. Once you have those in, you go back to your CSS and type in the word span, and go ahead and just insert the field property, the properties. Okay, so for example, I want it to be bigger than usual, so I'm going to say I'm going to change it to about 3 EM, so that's going to be about 1.5 times the size of the text itself. And say I want it to be a different color as well, so say something like yellow. Okay, and that's pretty much that bit, and we'll go ahead and see it. Okay, now watch this. Okay, right, well, it does work. It would usually work. Let's just see what we did wrong. Okay, well, I don't see too much of a big difference, but well, what you can do is, if you want, just do it via Inline CSS. So, okay, so the size and the color. Okay. Okay. And we may as well get rid of it from the CSS file since we already have it within our HTML file. Okay, so gonna go ahead and check that out. And there we go. And I'm not 100% sure why it didn't work when in the CSS file, but as long as it comes out the way you want it, then that's you done. Okay. So, if you also might notice that it's about an inch, because we know that 16 pixels is a default size, as is 12 points. And we have a 3em, which is triple the default size. So if you think about it, 16 by 3, which is going to be triple the default size, is in fact about 48, I think. Yep, 48. But with points wise, it's about 36. But you know, isn't much of a difference. Okay, so those are some three interesting things that could help you out. So just have fun practicing. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Leave a comment if you liked this or ask a question. Like my video if you think it's interesting, and you can watch many of my other tutorials. Thank you for watching.